I was 35 and working late in my cluttered office. It was a few months ago. I thought I understood the psychological toll of war, but the case of Lieutenant Harris had me questioning everything. I'd heard of soldiers doing strange things, but removing all your teeth. That was something different. As I sifted through his file, I found reports of odd behaviors. There were notes on paranoia, strange sensory changes, and anxiety attacks. I felt drawn into it. I spent hours trying to find a connection. Why had he done this? I needed answers. Maybe if I dug deeper, I could help understand. That night, while I pored over the case, I felt my gut twist. It felt like eyes were watching me from the shadows. I glanced around the room. Files were out of place. My coffee cup teetered on the edge of my desk. I shook off the feeling. It was just my imagination, but then, an anonymous message popped up on my screen. It said, "Stop looking into this." I dismissed it as a prank. Still, the feeling of being watched did not leave. More strange occurrences followed. I heard whispers at night. They were quiet, but they twisted around my thoughts, almost calling out. The next day, I went back to Harris's file. I expected clarity, but it only deepened my fear. There were mentions of other soldiers who'd gone downhill in a similar way. What was happening? Did they feel like there was something bigger out there, pushing them into madness? That night, the tension in the room was thick. I opened the file again, even though I felt a chill creeping over me. Suddenly, I heard a noise behind me. I turned fast, but there was nothing there. My heart raced as I repeated to myself that I was alone. That I forced myself to focus on the paperwork. The words blurred as I felt the air around me grow heavy. The thought that maybe the lieutenant's action was a symptom and not an isolated incident hung in my mind. I needed to get to the bottom of it. Then, another message appeared: "You're too close." This one made me freeze. I felt cold sweat creep down my back. My eyes darted to the door. It stood ajar, and the outline of a figure loomed there. "Hello?" I called out. My voice felt small. The only reply was the soft sound of teeth grinding together, right next to me. I spun around, and again, there was nobody. Just the darkness. The air tasted stale, and the shadows seemed to grow. I felt like whatever was left of Lieutenant Harris was reaching out to me. Why had he done it? My stomach knotted. I now realized something dark was hiding, waiting for me to uncover the truth. What if finding out meant inviting those secrets into my life? I was scared about the answers I longed for. My hands shook, and I stared into the dark, wondering what else I would find if I continued my search. I knew I had to take a break. Maybe sleep would help clear my head, but I didn't want to be alone. So, I left my office and decided to visit an old friend, Dr. Simmons. He'd worked with veterans for years. Maybe he could shed some light on Harris's strange behavior. The drive to his place felt uneventful, but my mind was racing. What was happening to those soldiers? Was there a connection between Harris and the others in his unit? I needed to know. As I arrived at Simmons's house, I noticed how quiet the neighborhood was. It almost felt like the calm before a storm. That I knocked on the door. It opened with a creak. Simmons looked surprised to see me. "What is going on?" he asked, concern etched on his face. I stepped inside, the warmth of his home wrapping around me like a blanket. I quickly explained Harris's case and the eerie messages I had received. Simmons listened intently, but his expression darkened. "There's been something going around," he said hesitantly. "Something I didn't think would affect so many." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward. He paused, collecting his thoughts. It started with a few cases like Harris's. They all showed symptoms of a new type of psychological trauma, but there's more things that make veterans feel isolated, like they're being watched, almost hunted. I thought it was just war-related stress. But you don't think that's all it is? My voice trembled a bit. It might be deeper. You should be careful. Some of these guys come back believing things no one else can see. My gut twisted. I felt a flood of emotions. I had to know if this was linked to Harris or something worse. Is there someone I can talk to about this? Simmons hesitated. You might want to reach out to Lieutenant Collins. He had a similar experience. But his voice trailed off, and I could tell he was holding back. What? I pressed, my heart pounding that he let out a heavy sigh. Just tread lightly. These men can be unpredictable, especially when they believe they're still under threat. With that warning, my resolve hardened. I needed to talk to Collins. I left Simmons's house, determined but apprehensive. There was something about the way Simmons said unpredictable that gnawed at me. What if I opened a door that couldn't be closed? As I drove home, I glanced in my rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone watching me. The roads appeared empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling I was being followed. It nagged at me. My thoughts spiraled back to Harris. That night, I found myself staring at my phone, debating whether to contact Collins. What would I even say? Then I noticed something on my desk, a handwritten note I hadn't seen before. I picked it up. It was short, written in a hurried script. They're coming for you. My blood ran cold. I flipped the note to see if there was any signature, but it was blank. Just then, I heard the unmistakable soft grinding of teeth behind me again. I froze. The shadows in the corners of my room seemed to shift, pulling me back into darkness. What had I stumbled into? I couldn't stop now. I needed answers, and I needed them soon. The next morning, I made up my mind. I had to reach out to Lieutenant Collins. I couldn't ignore the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I knew I had to go for it. I found the number in my phone. It had been saved for emergencies. It felt more like an act of desperation than preparation. As I dialed, my heart raced. I pictured Collins, a strong figure in uniform, somehow frail under the weight of whatever haunted him. When he answered, his voice was gruff but laced with fatigue. Who is this? Lieutenant Collins, it's Alex. I was hoping we could talk, I stammered. About what? He snapped, skepticism sharpened in his tone. I've been looking into some cases about veterans acting strangely. I heard you've had your own experiences, I said, trying to sound confident. A long pause followed. Those men are not just strange. They're dangerous, he finally said. You shouldn't be asking questions. The warning felt like a punch to the gut. I need to understand, I pressed. About Harris. About everything. His silence told me he was weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. Meet me at the diner on 5th at 8. Don't be late. The call ended abruptly, leaving me shaken. My plans for the day shifted, all thoughts of work disappeared. Instead, I found myself revolving around Collins's words, his fear hanging in my mind. He sounded like a man ready to unravel. Before I knew it, evening had arrived. I pulled up to the diner, the flickering neon sign casting a ghostly glow. It felt eerie, almost as if I were stepping into a movie scene. I walked inside cautiously, scanning the crowded booths. After a few moments, I spotted Collins seated in a corner. I felt a seeping dread as I approached. His face was drawn and pale, shadows under his eyes betraying sleepless nights. After exchanging anxious hellos, I dove right in. What happened to the men in your unit? His jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of something fear. Anger? You don't understand, he hissed, his voice low. Something got into their heads. It starts off with whispers, things that aren't real. What do you mean by not real? I thought it was stress, just like Simmons said, he continued, his tone picking up intensity. But these men are losing themselves. They hear things, see things that shouldn't be there. I leaned in, demanding answers. So, it's not just psychological. Collins looked past my shoulder, his gaze narrowing. It's like they're still on the battlefield, even here. And they can't tell what's a memory and what's a threat. It's not safe for you to be asking these questions. Before I could respond, he tensed suddenly. We need to leave. Now. Confused, I glanced around. What is going on? And that's when I saw it. A figure hovering by the diner entrance, almost blending into the shadows. I couldn't make out their face, but I felt a chill run down my spine. They were watching us. Get down. Collins barked, moving me behind the booth. My heart thumped erratically. What had I just walked into? In that moment, I realized I was deeper in this than I ever intended. All I had wanted was answers, but what I found felt like a waking nightmare. I crouched behind the booth, my breath catching in my throat. The figure by the entrance hadn't moved, but the tension in the air was palpable. Collins kept his eyes locked on the stranger, his face a mask of determination mixed with fear. What do you see? I whispered, trying to stay as calm as possible. Stay quiet, he replied, low and urgent. We can't let them know we're here. I nodded, though I had no idea who they were. My mind raced. Were we in danger? My instincts screamed for me to bolt, but Collins had insisted we stay. I felt trapped, as if the walls of the diner were closing in. The figure shifted slightly, and I finally caught a glimpse of a face pale, gaunt, eyes hollow. I couldn't shake the feeling that I recognized them. A chill crept up my spine again. It was as if the very shadows were alive, swirling around the person, shifting the reality around them. Collins, who is that? I stammered, hope mingling with dread. You don't want to know, he whispered back, his voice barely above a breath. Just know they aren't looking for a friendly chat. Before I could ask more, Collins grabbed my arm. This way, he said, pulling me toward the diner's back exit. I wanted to protest, but the urgency in his eyes stopped me. He pushed the door open gently, the sound of the diner's clattering dishes fading into the background as we slipped out into the alley behind the diner. The night felt heavier now, a suffocating darkness that seemed to cling to my skin. We need to keep moving, he urged, glancing back. The alley stretched before us, dimly lit with flickering bulbs overhead. Where are we going? I asked, panic creeping into my voice. Somewhere safe, he replied, though his tone wavered. I just need to get you out of here. As we hurried down the empty street, I caught a flash of movement off to the side. My heart dropped as I turned. There it was again, the shadow shifting behind a nearby dumpster. My instincts kicked in, ready to advocate for self-preservation. I pulled Collins back. What if they're coming after us? We can't just run aimlessly. He spun to face me, his expression fierce. Trust me, Alex. They know. Before I could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed on the pavement. Collins tightened his grip on my arm as we ducked into an alcove just off the street. I pressed my back against the cold wall, holding my breath. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by whispers, a cacophony of voices I couldn't decipher. It was as if the darkness had come alive, wrapping us in its embrace. Stay quiet, he repeated, but my heart raced as I caught snatches of conversation. They weren't just whispers, they held a familiarity that made my skin crawl. Get her now, one voice snarled. We can't let her get away. Not again. Did they see us? We can't risk it, another voice said, thick with dread. That I glanced at Collins, who was growing visibly tense. I felt my blood run cold. What did they want with me? I'd only been searching for answers, and now it seemed I was in way over my head. Then everything went dark. Out of nowhere, a shadow fell across us, the figure from the diner reappearing right in front of us. My mind raced. I had to protect myself. And before I could comprehend what was happening, I instinctively pushed Collins out of the way and moved to confront the shadow. What had I gotten myself into? I stood there, heart racing, staring defiantly at the shadow looming before me. It was hard to see through the darkness, but the figure's eyes glinted with an unsettling intensity that froze me in place. Wisps of shadow swirled around the figure like smoke, and I could barely make out the contours of its face when it shifted slightly. "Why are you hunting me?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my bravado. The figure stepped closer, the gloom morphing around it like a cloak. "You have something we want," it said, its voice smooth but cold, echoing ominously in the alley. "And you can't hide from us." Behind me, I could feel Collins shifting nervously. I shot him a glance, hoping to see a plan forming in his mind. Instead, he looked just as fearful as I felt. There was a decision to make. "Alex, no." He whispered harshly, but it was too late. The challenge was out there now, the shadow chuckled darkly. "What a brave little girl you are," it remarked, eyes narrowing. "But bravery doesn't change your fate." In that moment, something snapped inside me. I stepped away from the wall, clenching my fists. "I'm tired of being scared. Just tell me what you want." The figure paused, eyebrows raised in disbelief. For one heartbeat, the tension hung heavy in the air. Then its expression morphed into something more sinister. "We want you to come with us. You're not safe here." "Not anymore," it said, voice dripping with a creeping darkness. The shadows seemed to ripple in response, drawing nearer that I could hear Collins breathing heavily behind me, the sound reminding me that I wasn't alone. I had to think quickly. "What are you?" I muttered, though part of me already knew the answer. "It doesn't matter who or what I am," the shadow replied, advancing another step. "What matters is that you belong to us now." Collins grabbed my arm, urgency flooding his voice. "We need to get out of here, Alex. Now." I hesitated, then tore my gaze from the shadow. I instinctively swung around to face Collins, ready to bolt back the way we'd come. But the moment I turned, I saw a second figure materialize from the depths of the darkness, blocking our escape. "Going somewhere?" it taunted, a malicious grin breaking up the gloom. My heart sank, there was no way out. I felt the walls closing in, panic clawing at my chest. "Alex, listen to me." Collins squeezed my hand tighter. "We can't let them separate us. They'll take you where?" I shot back, desperate for any sliver of clarity. "The dark web," Collins said, swallowing hard. "That's where they operate. They take people." Before he could finish, the shadows converged around us. I could see it, the way they almost pulsed and twitched, eager to close in on us. In the dim light, I caught a glimpse of the first figure's face, a stormy expression filling its hollow eyes. Suddenly, everything went quiet. The whispers dulled, leaving behind a silence that felt suffocating. Then, I spotted something glinting in the corner of my vision, the back of the dumpster. The glimmer was faint, but it held a promise. My resolve ignited. "To the dumpster!" I shouted, pulling Collins with me. As we sprinted, I felt the darkness nipping at our heels, but something told me there still was a way out, but I had no idea what lay ahead, and already it felt like the shadows were reaching out to pull us back into the cold abyss. We dove behind the dumpster just as I heard a hiss of air spell out my name. "Alex!" It echoed with a low growl, cutting through the chaos. My heart raced louder than the shadows that chased us. Collins crouched beside me, our bodies pressed against the hard metal. I could see fear etched into every line of his face, but there was also determination. "We can't stay here," he whispered urgently, looking at the shadows creeping ever closer. "I know," I replied, breathless, trying to catch my thoughts. I needed a plan, something to fight back. Collins had mentioned the dark web. They were tied to something beyond our understanding. I had to find out more, and fast. The glimmer at the edge of the dumpster caught my eye again. I leaned forward cautiously. There, half hidden in the rubbish, was a small metal toolbox. My pulse quickened. "Collins, look." I pointed at the toolbox. "Can you help me open it?" He hesitated for just a second. I could see doubt, but desperation outweighed fear. Okay. Just be quick. He moved closer, covering the gap between us and the toolbox. I pulled at the rusted latch, my fingers fumbling in the dark. It broke open with a sharp click, revealing an assortment of tools: screwdrivers, pliers, and even a wrench. My heart sank for a moment, but then I spotted something else, nestled between the tools. A silver blade, small but sharp. Perfect, I murmured, grabbing the knife. A sliver of hope ignited within me. If they come closer, no. We can't fight them, Alex, Collins protested, eyes wide. We need to run. I nodded, knowing he was right, yet that blade felt powerful in my hand. What if I distract them? You can use the chaos to slip past. His gaze sharpened, the glimmer of a plan forming in his eyes. If you can get them to focus on you, I can make a break for it. But you have to promise to follow right after. Deal, I said, gripping the knife tighter. I peered over the dumpster's edge to see where the shadows hovered. They loomed thick, almost tangible, whispering my name like a chant. Taking a deep breath, I stood tall, brandishing the knife. Hey! I shouted, channeling every ounce of bravado I could muster. You want me? Come and get me. The shadows shifted. I could feel their attention snapping toward me like a spring, their whispers intensifying into a shrill hiss. Foolish girl, the first figure sneered, now stepping toward me. You should fear the darkness. I exchanged a quick look with Collins. Now. He launched himself from the other side of the dumpster, darting toward the alley exit. I watched him go, wishing I could follow, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The shadows were closing in, their grip tightening around me. Run, Collins! I shouted, my heart pounding in my chest. My legs finally moved, shifting into motion while I held my ground against the advancing darkness. Suddenly, something small hit my shoulder, a tiny glimmer of light, almost electric, but I didn't have time to process it. And just like that, everything went dark. I gasped as darkness swallowed me whole. It felt suffocating, an inky void wrapping around my body and pulling me into a cold shroud. An eerie silence replaced the chaos of the alley, and I couldn't hear Collins or the shadows anymore. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowned out by my fear. Gradually, I became aware of a faint glow, pulsing from within the darkness. The light flickered like a dying firefly, teasing my vision. I focused on it, willing myself to approach. With every step, the shadows around me began to recede, and I felt a strange tugging, like being drawn toward a distant shore. As I reached the source, I realized it was a small orb of light, intensifying with my touch. An image flickered inside, rushing images of faces, places, and symbols I didn't understand. Someone's memories. My fingers tingled when I held it, and I could almost hear whispers, urging me to listen more closely. Alex, a voice echoed, sending chills down my spine. It was familiar, yet haunting. You've been chosen. Trust the light. Who are you? I called out to the darkness, but only silence answered back. The glow pulsed, and a silhouette emerged from the dimness, a figure just beyond reach. I squinted but couldn't make out any details. Then, with a swift breath, I was jolted back into reality, crashing onto the pavement. The alley flooded back in, and I lay sprawled amidst the garbage and debris. Collins was nowhere to be seen. Panic surged through me again. Had the shadows taken him? I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing. The knife felt heavy in my grip, but I was energized by the light's promise. I had to find Collins. Clenching my jaw, I darted toward the alley's exit. Collins! I shouted, my voice trembling. Where are you? My heart sank. It was too quiet. I rounded the corner, still scanning the area. Just in time, I noticed a door ajar at the old coffee shop across the street. The neon sign flickered weakly, yet it seemed like the only option. I hesitated, sensing a strange pull. The whispers from the orb crept back into my mind. Trust the light. Gathering my courage, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. It was dimly lit, dust motes dancing in the air. Tables were overturned, and a faint smell of burnt coffee lingered. My breath caught as I noticed the counter still holding a half-finished cup, cold and untouched. Collins? I whispered, the word feeling lost in the vast emptiness. I took a cautious step further inside when suddenly, I noticed something by the window, a flicker of movement and my heart hammering. I rushed forward. But as I turned the corner, I froze. There, hunched over against the wall, was Collins. His back was to me, and he seemed out of breath. Collins! I shouted, relief washing over me. But when he turned slowly, my smile faltered. His eyes glinted, not with fear, but something darker. You're not supposed to be here, Alex. Then, behind him, I saw a shadow stretching, writhing as if alive, pulling me back into the depths of uncertainty. Collins, what is going on? I asked, taking a hesitant step closer. The shadow behind him pulsated, its edges blurred and moving like smoke. I could feel its coldness creeping toward me, and a knot tightened in my stomach. You shouldn't have come here, he said, his voice low and steady. There was a strange calmness in his demeanor, but it was deeply unsettling. You have to leave. Now. Leave? Why? We need to stick together. I tried to sound more confident than I felt. I scanned the room, half expecting something to leap out at me. Trust me, Collins said, his gaze flickering to the shadow creeping along the floor. This is not just an alley. It's a gateway. At those words, my heart raced with confusion. I thought of the light, the whispers. What do you mean? Before he could answer, the shadow surged forward, expanding rapidly. It felt like a living thing, hungry and alive. My mind screamed at me to run. Collins! I yelled, but before I could move, his eyes changed. They darkened, and the familiar sparkle disappeared, replaced by something cold and empty. Alex, you need to listen to me, he said, but his voice was different now. Strange. They're coming for you. Who? I was filled with dread. I took a few steps back, my grip tightening on the knife. What are you talking about? Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. The sound echoed in the empty shop, and I jumped. I turned, heart racing again. I grabbed the handle but it wouldn't budge. I stammered, panicking. I glanced back at Collins, but he was no longer crouched in fear. He was now standing, rigid. The shadow kept shifting behind him. Collins, please. Help me. And then I saw it. An outline forming beside him, another figure emerging from the depths of darkness. A face distorted and grotesque, watching me with hollow eyes. My breath hitched. Alex, Collins' voice turned almost sweet, but it was wrong. Let them in. They'll keep you safe. No. I shouted, the panic bubbling in me. I had to escape. I turned back to the door, but fear propelled me forward. I lunged toward Collins, knife raised that he moved just as I swung, and the knife hit nothing but air. The darkness pulsed, wrapping around me like a chain. I struggled, trying to break free, the whispers growing louder, calling my name. Trust the light, they urged, but it was hard to focus, hard to fight against the growing shadow wrapping around my mind. With every moment, the world felt heavier. Everything in the coffee shop warped and twisted, reality splintered, that when I saw it, the orb, glowing in the corner where light faded. I took a step toward it, feeling warmth against the cold. I will trust, I murmured, nearly lost in the shadow's grip. Suddenly, the shadow rippled, and the grotesque face dove toward me, intent on pulling me into its depths. The light flickered, and a sudden surge of courage filled me. I lunged toward the orb, grasping it tightly. Get away from me! I yelled, as I felt the glow expand, pushing against the darkness, the shadow shrieked, and Collins staggered back, the light threatening to consume him. I didn't dare look back as I felt the power of the orb surge, dragging me toward safety, but just as I entered the warmth, I heard Collins' voice rise above the chaos, raw and desperate. "Alex! Don't leave me!" Then everything went dark. I awoke not to the soft hum of the coffee shop but to a stark silence, one that felt heavy and unyielding. I blinked hard, trying to shake off the fog. My surroundings were different. No shadows. No Collins. Just an empty, dimly lit room. A shiver raced down my spine. Where am I? I pushed myself to sit, the cool surface beneath me sending a jolt of discomfort through my nerves. I rubbed my eyes, still trying to piece together what had happened. The orb. The shadows. Collins' voice. I looked around more carefully. The walls were lined with shelves, but they held old books, dusty relics of another time. I recognized a few titles from my high school classes, but the whole setup felt wrong, misplaced. I noticed a door on the far side, slightly ajar. My heart quickened at the thought of escape, but I hesitated. What if there was something waiting for me outside? Sucking in a breath, I got to my feet. They felt unsteady beneath me, like I hadn't used them in days. I took a tentative step toward the door. I needed to know where I was. I needed to find Collins if he was even alive. As I approached the door, a strange unease settled over me. It was quiet. Too quiet. Then I heard a faint sound from the other side, a rhythmic tapping. I stopped cold, listening intently. It sounded like someone or something was moving around out there. "Help me," the voice whispered, and it was definitely Collins. My heart trembled at the sound, a rush of relief mixed with fear. It had to be him. I pulled the door open slowly, peeking through the crack. The hallway was dimly lit, filled with shadows that seemed to stretch toward me. The air was thick and damp, and a strange smell, a mix of musk and decay, clung to everything. I stepped into the hallway, keeping the door ajar in case I needed a quick escape. "Collins?" I called, my voice fragile against the stillness. "Alex." His voice was clearer now, but laced with desperation. "This way." I followed the sound, my heart pounding as I moved further down the hall. Each step felt heavy, the fear gnawing at my resolve. I could hear my breath loud in my ears, but I ignored every instinct that told me to turn back. Turning a corner, I saw him. Collins was crouched at the end of the hallway, his face pale and drawn. My relief was short-lived as I noticed the shadows swirling around him, darker than before, more intense. "Get away from them!" I shouted, but as soon as the words left my lips, I felt a blast of cold air flooding down the hallway. "Alex, please!" he begged, his eyes wild. "I need you to trust me." I didn't understand. I should be saving him, not the other way around. "What are you talking about?" Before he could answer, the ground beneath us shook. I stumbled and caught myself against the wall. The shadow at the end of the hallway expanded, moving toward Collins like a predator closing in on its prey. "Run!" he yelled, his voice ragged. I turned, instinct taking over, but just as I did, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. A figure, half-formed, with eyes like burning coals. And then I realized I might not be the only one trapped here. The door behind me slammed shut with a loud thud, echoing in the darkness. I felt the walls close in, panic rising in my chest. There was no escape. I was still standing in that hallway, heart racing, when a new voice chimed in from the shadows. "You should have let him in." The darkness shifted, and I knew I was about to find out what that meant. It happened in an instant. The shadows writhed, coiling and twisting like angry serpents around Collins. I felt paralyzed, caught between fear and a tidal wave of confusion. The voice from the shadows slipped into my mind, urging me to make a choice. Their whispers swirled, washing over my thoughts like a heavy fog. Let them in, the voice urged once more, smooth yet sinister. You don't know what they can offer. Collins. Fight it. I screamed, my heart pounding against the confines of my chest. Looking at him now, I saw a flicker of something familiar behind his eyes, but it was snuffed out almost immediately by the encroaching darkness. No, Alex. He rasped, twisting against the shadow's grip. You don't understand. They want you, they thrive on fear. If you give in now, another surge of cold air rushed through the hallway, drowning out his words. I felt the shadows throb and pulse, the corridor darkening to an almost tangible presence. This felt alive. Desperate, I sprinted towards him, ripping through the veil of darkness that seemed to thicken with every step. I won't leave you. I grabbed his hand, feeling the coldness spread from the shadows into my skin. Just hold on. As the shadows writhed, almost sentient, I could hear their whispers grow into a clamoring roar, each voice distinct yet layered. They promised power, whispered secrets about the dark web, the realm beyond what we see. They spoke of survival, of stepping beyond the fear, of succumbing to the allure of the unknown. I felt my resolve flicker, a small voice in my head asking what it would be like, to embrace that darkness. No. I shouted, shaking my head fiercely. I wouldn't let them in. Not like this. Summoning every ounce of strength, I focused on the orb of light, the warmth it had given me before. Merging my thought with purpose, I struggled to draw from it. I felt it pulse in my chest like a heartbeat, and though the shadows tightened around us, I shouted, Light, come to me. In a staggering flash, the orb surged back into existence, bursting forth like a beacon, illuminating the hollow, gasping shadows. The room exploded with luminescence, and suddenly it was like giving the darkness the shock of its life. Collins' eyes widened as the light washed over him. The shadows screamed in a cacophony of dissonant voices, retreating as if burned. Now! I shouted, pulling Collins towards the light. Somehow, it felt like a back-and-forth dance, a play between the smothering dark and the light that sought to break free. We stumbled backward, the radiance wrapping around us, pushing the shadows further away. They twisted and writhed, coiling like the last vestiges of a dying creature. Trust the light. I urged, grabbing Collins tightly, feeling the warmth fight against the coldness creeping back into my bones. Together, we pressed forward, away from the terror, and then I turned toward an open door at the end of the hallway, pulsing with that same light. We emerged into a cavernous space, the shadows receding farther behind us, but the eerie silence offered no comfort. Just as we crossed the threshold, there was a final screeching howl from the dark, echoing ominously in the background. I turned to look back only once, dread slicing through me as I saw the shadowy figures twisting into shapes of faces I had almost forgotten. I don't know where to go from here, I admitted to Collins, the adrenaline fading but the weight of everything still pressing down. Neither do I, he replied, breathless. But we're still here. The finality of the darkness stayed etched behind my eyes, yet the warm glow surrounding us offered a flicker of hope. As my heartbeat steadied, I swept the room with cautious eyes, odd relics and shadows still lingered about, signs of what this place may hold. But as we stood there, gasping and uncertain, I couldn't help but wonder if the darkness would only wait for another moment of weakness. I felt changed. I faced something unlike anything I could articulate, and I held questions I hadn't even begun to properly ask. Maybe the darkness would return. Territorial and patient. Maybe the light was only a brief reprieve. We need to keep moving, Collins finally said, his voice steadying. We have to find a way out of whatever this is. Together, we stepped deeper into the flickering glow before us, a choice wrapped in uncertainty. And as I looked back one last time at the darkened hallway, I couldn't shake the question lingering in my mind, was the real battle over, or was it just beginning?